Hi, my name is Nicola, and for those of you that don't know me, I'm here on behalf of the Child Behaviour Network. I'm a child behaviour specialist and a Norland Nanny, so I've got a degree in early years development and learning and a Norland diploma, and I've been working with children with additional needs for over 14 years now in a variety of settings, including schools, specialist schools, nurseries, family homes, and holiday clubs. So, whether you're a grandparent, a teacher, a family friend, maybe you're a helper at a club, or a carer, or a parent who's new to this world of autism, I'm so glad that you have taken the step to download this webinar and better understand and support your child with autism. So, what we're going to talk about during this session, well, we're going to start by looking at what is autism or ASD. I'm going to give you some guiding principles. These are things that it's good to have in place all of the time to help your child feel safe and secure. And then we're going to have a think about what can we do if your child is starting to struggle. And I'm going to give you a bit of a toolkit of strategies that you can use in those moments. So if we start by thinking about additional needs more broadly and what that might mean, the image on the screen is of 3 containers with different coloured balls in. Each colour represents a particular trait, and then the second ring around the top indicates what we call a diagnostic threshold. So that's the point at which a child might receive a diagnosis by a professional. So if we imagine that the light blue balls are autistic traits. So in image 1, this is where you have a child who has all of their traits of autism lined up in one row. So they have reached the diagnostic threshold. So this child, if the family would like, can get a diagnosis for autism because they've hit the criteria. In the second image, you have a child who has lots of different traits of lots of different additional needs. So they might be a little bit dyslexic, they might have a little bit of ADHD, they might have a little bit of dyspraxia. And if we continue with the light blue being autistic traits, so they have autistic traits, but none of them are actually meeting the criteria for a diagnosis. So this child in the middle probably doesn't have a diagnosis for anything. And then in the third, you have a child who has autistic traits. We can see they've got some light blue balls there in their basket, but they don't meet the diagnostic threshold. But the dark blue balls, if we imagine perhaps this is ADHD, they do have enough dark blue balls to reach a diagnosis. So perhaps they have a diagnosis for ADHD, but what I want to point out is that doesn't mean they don't also have traits of autism. So some of their needs might actually be driven by their autism rather than the ADHD, even though that's what they've got a diagnosis for. So all of these children have a combination of strengths and needs. And so I think what this really clearly explains is that all of these children are different. We need to be really careful about not focusing on whether they have a diagnosis or not, and just looking at their needs that are in front of you. And remembering that if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. They will all present their autism in completely different ways, and they will all be completely unique because we are all unique as human beings. And having a diagnosis or having additional needs doesn't change that. However, obviously there are some common traits for all people with autism. So if we start by thinking about what is autism, so I said autism / ASD. ASD stands for autistic spectrum disorder. They're the same thing. So autism is a lifelong disability which affects how people communicate and interact with the world. So there are about 700,000 adults and children on the autistic spectrum in the UK. And like everyone, they have their own strengths and challenges. So all people with autism will have difficulties communicating and with social interaction. So for some, it could mean not speaking at all. For others, it might mean that they need longer to process information, or that they might have difficulties understanding facial expressions. Lots of people with autism engage in repetitive behavior, so doing or thinking the same thing over and over. And sometimes this is for fun. You might have observed that your child really enjoys doing the same activity again and again, or playing the same game, or making the same joke again and again. So that's sort of a positive outworking of it, but sometimes they do need to do it to deal with their anxiety. So there are two different reasons for this repetitive behavior that we might see. All people with autism will struggle with unexpected change. However small, it can sometimes be really distressing. And people with autism will also probably struggle with sensory overload. So this could be when noises or smells or touch, things like bright lights, can become really overwhelming, actually to the point of sometimes being painful for them. So all of these challenges can sometimes make the world feel really scary for people with autism, and also confusing and hard to understand. Sometimes this can result in people with autism having physical and emotional meltdowns or shutdowns, which is probably sort of when you see the most extreme presentation of their behavior. That's when they're sort of at their most distressed. That would be a meltdown or a shutdown potentially. So what can we do to best support people with autism? So here are our guiding principles. So these are the things that we recommend that you put in place all of the time, because they will help your child to feel really safe and secure, and that will help to prevent any challenging behavior, and it will encourage the behaviors that we do want to see. So firstly, a calm and organized environment. All children, but especially children with autism, really like to know what to expect. So have a predictable routine so that they know what's coming up. Explain to them if plans change. That's really important. Don't try and hope they won't notice, because especially if they have autism, they almost definitely will notice that the plan has changed, and they'll find it much more distressing if you don't acknowledge it and talk about it and explain it. So have predictable routines. Even if it's just at the beginning and the end of the day, they're always the same. Find little moments where you can create predictability for them, because that will help them to feel safe and secure. Children with autism often struggle to change from one activity to another. So maybe to finish playing and get ready to go to school, or to leave the soft play, or any transition where you're going from one activity to another can be challenging. So if your child struggles with that, make sure you're giving them a 5-minute and a 2-minute warning of what's going to happen next. So you're not just going to say in 2 minutes it's time to stop playing. We're going to say in 2 minutes we're going to stop playing and sit down at the table for lunch, or whatever it is that's happening next, so that they can start to prepare themselves for the next activity. Also consider how your resources are organized. So by that, I mean all their things that they use. So can we keep their pens in a pencil case so that they always know where they are? Can we always put their shoes in the same place so that they're really easy for them to find? Make it as easy as possible for your child to know where things are and find them easily for themselves, because they might struggle to communicate with you what it is they're looking for. They might struggle to communicate with you that they're feeling frustrated that they can't find something. So let's just avoid all of that by having things kept in the same place all the time and sort of neat and organized best we can. I know it's really hard with children, but to the best we can, it just will help to prevent some of those pinch points in the day, which could be challenging. Our second guiding principle is language. Language is so powerful and needs to be carefully considered for all children, but particularly when talking to a child who maybe has additional needs, such as autism. So think about when you're giving instructions, make sure that they're really specific. So for example, instead of saying you would like to see good behavior, say that you would like to see them staying in their chair the whole meal time and using their cutlery, or whatever it is that you decide is sort of appropriate in your setting. But just saying good behavior probably isn't enough information for them. They need a really specific instruction. Do you want them to be sat down and facing the front? Do you want them to put down what they're fiddling with? What is it that you would like them to do? Also consider reducing the language you're using. Give shorter and simpler instructions. So, for example, if you're trying to get a child ready to leave the house, rather than saying something like, okay, Sam, soon it's going to be time to go to the trampoline park with Emily. So we need to think about tidying up. Oh, and we need to find your socks. And then let me know if you want to take a snack with you and I'll get one ready. We're going to be leaving in about 5 minutes. That's quite a lot of information. So think to yourself, what do you want your child to take away from what you've said? What's their call to action? Are you information sharing, or are you actually asking them to do something? So I might say something like, Sam, in 5 minutes, we're going to tidy up, because then we're going to the trampoline park with Emily. Before we go, we're going to get a snack if you would like one, and find your socks. So I will leave you to play for 5 minutes, and then we will tidy up and get ready to go. Even that might be too much for your child. All your children will be at different stages. It might be that that's too much. Maybe you just say 5 more minutes playing, then we're tidying up and going to the trampoline park. Or first playing, next trampoline park. So just think about how you communicate on what level you think your child is at, like how much information that they need. And also, by the way, that might change from day to day, because children like to keep us on our toes. So one day they might be able to deal with like the full sentences and the 3 different instructions of, can you do this, this, and this? And then another day they might be having a more difficult day and they need first playing, then trampoline park. And that's okay. Allow take-up time. So this is when giving instructions to a child, make sure that we're giving them time to process the information we've given them and act on it. So if we say to them, please could you tidy up the pens and put them all in the pen pot, we're then just going to wait quietly before stepping in to repeat or to assist, because sometimes it might feel like the child's ignoring you, but it's more likely that they're processing what's been asked of them. So just give them a little bit of space to act on it. Here's a visual you can use if your child maybe doesn't have many verbal skills, or you just sense that when you're giving instructions or when you're sharing information with them, they're maybe struggling to take it on board. You can have visuals for them. This is one that's been made online with a company called Widget, but you can just simply draw a picture on a piece of paper of what's happening now and what's happening next. And children find this really, really helpful. It just helps them to grasp exactly what we're doing. And it's really easy for them to comprehend. So that's something I would absolutely recommend. Our third guiding principle is praise. We recommend praising all of the time with a few caveats. So make sure your praise is genuine. Children will know if your praise isn't genuine. I remember that I nannied for a child, and on our way home from a play date once, I said to both the children in the back of the car, I said, "Oh, well done, you were both really good at that play date." And he said, "Well, I wasn't really, because I did hit him." And so that sort of took me to these 2 points of genuine and then also specific and labelled. I said, yeah, you did. I mean, that wasn't great. You're right. We addressed that at the time. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have hit him, for sure. Yeah. But you did do your puzzle really nicely with him. You shared your puzzle really nicely, and you worked really hard to build that together. So he knew my well done, you're at the play date wasn't really genuine, because the whole play date wasn't successful in that sense. If I'd have given specific and labelled praise, he would have been able to take it on board, because he did do the puzzle really, really well. And when you give specific and labelled praise, it also means The child then knows what they're meant to do next time because they know what you've identified as the good behavior, the behavior that's made other people happy, that's had a positive impact. And then it's really easy for the child to repeat that behavior. Also, let's praise partial compliance. So it might be that you've asked them to sit at the table and eat their dinner nicely. And they sit at the table, but they're not eating. I would say, I can see you're sitting so nicely in your chair. Well done. How was your day at school? So we're going to ignore the thing that they're not doing right or the thing that we've asked them to do that they haven't done. And we're going to focus on praising the thing that they are doing right, the thing that we did ask them to do. And lastly, connection. This is our last guiding principle. It's so important that we remain connected with our children and what they're feeling deep down. So when your child's having some big emotions, what we're going to do is we're going to name it to tame it. So this is where we connect with the child and we acknowledge the emotion that they're feeling. So it might be that maybe they were playing with their sibling and they got really cross and they've hit their sibling. So how we would acknowledge that is we would say, I can see you're having some really big feelings. I wonder if you're feeling angry because you lost the game. So we're naming that feeling, that emotion of anger, because the child might not know that that's what this feeling inside of them is called. So it's really helpful to label it for them. I wonder if you're feeling angry. And then the second step is we're going to validate this emotion. So we might say something like, it's completely okay to feel angry. I understand it's so frustrating to lose. No one likes to lose. I get really disappointed when I lose at games as well. It's really normal for that to make you feel really angry. And we can empathize. Maybe you're aware that your child has difficulties with social interactions or language difficulties. So we might say something like, I know that sometimes it can be really hard to find the right words to use. And then sometimes our hands move quicker than our thoughts. And sometimes we don't mean to, but then we hit someone and it hurts them because we just couldn't find the words in time. So that's us validating and empathizing with the emotion that the child is feeling. What we can then do, though, is set limits if needed. So we might say something like, so we've said all the stuff about how it's okay to have these big feelings. And then we say, but it's never okay to hit. We don't hit our brother. That's really hurt him. So the emotions are always valid, but the behavior doesn't always have to be accepted. We can put limits on the behavior. We can put limits on how that emotion is expressed. And then we really crucially, the last step is we move on to problem solving. So we might say something like, would you like to play the game again? Or should we play a different game together? Maybe a game where you don't have winners and losers. So help the child to identify what they can do to move them out of that feeling of anger and to create a more positive situation. So there are 4 guiding principles. We're going to think about having a calm and organized environment, how we can do that within our setting or our home. Think about the language we're using, make sure that we're praising loads, really specific praise, and make sure that we stay connected to the emotions that our children are feeling. But what do we do when a child starts to struggle, which will inevitably happen, and really crucially, especially if your child has additional needs. Your child might be struggling, and it can be really easy to get into the mindset of what should I have done to prevent this struggle? Sometimes there's nothing that you can do to prevent the struggle. Sometimes there is. Sometimes it's helpful to reflect and think maybe we should have done X, Y, Z differently. Next time we'll change that. But I think it's really important that we're kind to ourselves. And sometimes our child will be having a struggle, and there's nothing we could have done to take that struggle away. We just need to sit with them in it and love them through it and do the best we can to help them in this moment. So here's some things we can do. Playfulness. So this is having a light and joyful approach to life the best we can, and helping the child to try and see it that way. So for example, I was playing a matching game with a child the other day, and he was getting quite frustrated. He really didn't want to lose. This was a big struggle he was going through at the moment of not wanting to lose. And so we were turning over the pieces, and I could see he was getting frustrated that we kept turning over the pieces and not getting a match. And so I tried to remain as lighthearted as I could about it, and it became infectious. So we turned over like 3 different E's in a row, and I said, and I sort of chuckled and said, I can't believe it. I cannot believe that we have turned over 3 E's and none of us even need an E. That is so silly. That is so funny. Like, what are the chances? And he was then able to repeat that. So next time we turned over an E, instead of getting frustrated, he went, oh, I don't believe it. What are the chances? And it just it completely changed the atmosphere from what could have been frustration and ended up in a really upset game. It just kept it light and breezy, which I know can be hard when you're tired. But just trying to put positive spin on things can help a child to feel safe, because they see us as having positive reactions to things. And it also helps to model to them that we have a choice in these situations. We can either have a negative response or we can have a positive response. Also, curiosity. So a brilliant phrase to use is, I wonder. So some children find it really hard when you are too sort of confrontational in the way you speak, or you might not intend it to be confrontational at all, but that's how they interpret it. So saying to a child, you need to go and have a drink, you're really hot and sweaty. You might have a child that immediately, as soon as you say you need to go and have a drink, they say, no, I don't. And just because you've said it, they disagree. Or you need to go and have a nap. I'm not tired. Or when they have the complete bursting into tears and wailing that they're not tired, which I always think is really ironic, because that to me just proves how tired you are. But if you can use the phrase, I wonder, is really helpful, because it just takes that sort of element of power struggle out of it. So we might say, I wonder whether having some water might help. Or I wonder whether maybe a little bit of quiet time would be a good idea. And just plant the seed and walk away. Or I wonder whether you're feeling a bit wobbly today because the plan's changed. Because especially when it comes to feelings, we don't necessarily know how they're feeling. So sometimes it's helpful to guess with an I wonder. Empathy. So we've already touched on this a little bit, but empathy is so important to help a child feel seen and heard and understood. So saying to a child, I understand that you're upset because the plan changed today. The plan has still changed. The situation is still not ideal, and perhaps completely out of your control, and might still be really frustrating, and it might still, the child might still struggle and might still not be happy with the fact that it's changed. But having empathy with the child helps you and the child to stay connected, helps the child to feel that they're not alone in this feeling, that this feeling is okay and normal and valid. And also helps for it to feel like it's you and the child against the problem. So maybe the problem is that the car's broken down, and so we can't do the activity we were going to do today. So it's not, you and the child aren't against each other in this, it's you and the child are a team, and this is a really frustrating problem. We're both frustrated about it, and we're going to get through this together, and we're going to find solutions. Empathy all the time. Empathy is massive. Really, really encourage you to consider like how you can fit more empathy into your interactions. Appropriate distraction. This can be really good. If you see a child starting to escalate and you think that they're starting to have a little bit of a wobble, or maybe you're starting to see some challenging behavior and you'd like to find a way to sort of nip it in the bud, you could suddenly say something like, wow, did you just see that bird? Can you see bird flying around the garden. Wow. And that might be enough to just snap your child out of whatever headspace they're in into a different one. Or it might be, I just remembered what I was going to ask you. Last week, you told me that you were going to the farm this weekend. And that can completely diffuse the situation. If, you're maybe having a struggle with putting shoes on or whatever it is, take their head somewhere else. And then maybe you can slip their shoes on, or maybe you just talk about something else, then you come back to it. And it also feeds into the playfulness element, because if you feel yourself getting frustrated and you're able to then create a distraction, it gives you both a bit of a break. Set up for a win. So this is where we might give a child an activity that's below the stage they would normally do. Or we might help them to do something that normally we'd expect them to do for themselves. It's just recognizing that in that moment when your child is struggling, it's okay to give them a little bit more support so that they can feel the victory of doing it for themselves. So that's not inconsistent. I know consistency is really important, but it's okay to acknowledge, yeah, normally I expect them to put their coat on themselves, but today I'm going to hold it up for them, so all they need to do is slip their arms in because they're struggling today. And we all know that they'll feel better once we go out for a walk. So let's just help them get the coat on. Let's just set them up for a win. Let's do it for them today. And that's okay, because they're human, just like us. So it's okay to acknowledge that they might need different things on different days. And actually, you are being consistent in the sense that you're consistently responding to their needs. So when they're able to, you ask them to do it on their own. But you're acknowledging that maybe today they're not able to, and that's okay. Calm and clear instructions. This is so important if a child is struggling. Make it really clear what's expected. And that might sound really obvious, but sometimes when a child's struggling, we try lots of different things, or we ask lots of questions. So we might say, tell me what I can do to help, or maybe we're at home and we say, are you going to come and have your dinner? These are questions, and your child, most likely, if they're struggling, won't be able to process and respond to these questions. So it's much more helpful to give polite but clear instructions. So, Emily, it's time to sit down at the table. That's much more helpful for them. It might sound really direct, it might sound really blunt, but that's much more helpful than, are you going to come and have your dinner? Unless dinner is genuinely optional, and then you can ask them. But if you would like them to come and sit down at the table and eat their dinner, and you can see that they're struggling, saying to them, are you going to come and have dinner, is really confusing, because they might say, not today. And then you follow it up with telling them that they need to come and have their dinner. And then it feels like the demand's changed. So be really clear about what's expected, and really sort of specific in those instructions, even more so when a child's struggling. So really think about massively reducing it down compared to how you usually communicate with them. So this has just been really brief. It's just been an introduction, but here are our key takeaway messages. We're going to make sure that we connect before we correct. So connecting with the child before we correct their behavior. We're going to choose our battles wisely. If you fight them all, you'll be too tired to win the ones that really matter. So it might be not worrying too much about what they're wearing, for example. If they don't want to put their coat on, is it an option for you to just carry the coat until you get to the park rather than trying to get it on them before you go? Things like that. All behavior is communicating a need. That doesn't mean that all behavior is acceptable, but it's recognizing that it's communicating a need. So our role as carers is to try and identify what's that need that they're communicating. And we're going to praise the behaviors we want to see more of. Because if you praise the behaviors you want to see more of, those behaviors are going to get repeated, and you'll get to see more of the positive behaviours, and then gradually the behaviours you don't want to see will start to disappear without you having to directly address them, which is much harder to do. So just praise the behaviours you want to see more of, and you'll see them repeated. If you found this really helpful, but you're thinking you'd maybe like some more support or wondering what else we can do, we provide consultancy. So that's where we meet either in person or online, and we can talk through the specific challenges that you're having with your family or your organization, and we can come up with a bespoke strategy plan. We do something called strategies in action, which is like coaching if you want us to come to your organization or your home and help you to work out how you're going to implement all these things I've spoken about. It might be that you think that all sounds great, Nicola. I tried it, it didn't work. Or I have no idea how I'm actually meant to implement that when I have 3 different children, or whatever it is. I would love to come and help you to work out exactly what this looks like for you. I also have other webinars that might be helpful. So there's one, we touched a bit on meltdowns and shutdowns. I've got a webinar on that could be really helpful, because that is referring to sort of specific autistic meltdowns and shutdowns. And I go more into this in the webinar, but I'm not talking about a tantrum. I'm talking about an autistic meltdown and shutdown in that webinar. And then also we provide training. If you have an organization or a group of parents and carers and you want to get together and do some training, we can come and deliver that. So either get in touch with me by emailing me, nicola.rayner@tcbn.co.uk, or if you go to our website, tcbn.co.uk, if you go /book-online, you can automatically book a consultancy, or you can book a 15-minute phone call if you think, I don't really know what we need, and I'll give you a call and we can work out what would be best for you. But I hope it's been really helpful. I'm really glad that you've taken some time out to work out how you can better support the child in your life that has autism or additional needs. It's been really great. Thank you.